Hi, it's Craig from Scratch at 50. Today's video, we're back around the chipping green following on from my last video, and in today we're going to be talking about by understanding how to use the bounce on your wedges correctly, we can take the fear completely out of chipping. Okay, let's get cracking. So in the last video we talked about how trying to keep the chipping action as simple as possible, and I'll explain that by trying to take this right wrist out of the chipping action. Now I just want to clarify something, because in the last video, of which a little link is going to appear now in case you want to go and watch that, I did get a few comments and people saying, oh, but your right wrist is flexing a little bit. And yes it is, but you know, it's a feeling that we're looking for. What we're looking for is taking as much action of the wrists out of the chipping action and using as much of the big muscles as possible. So using our body in the chipping action. Okay, so you know, if you can keep your wrists absolutely stiff wristed like Jason Day, for example, then fantastic. For me, I still get a little bit of wrist hinge, but what we're trying to take out of it is any of this, because that introduces the leading edge to the ground and also introduces the possibility of a thin. If you've been watching the US PGA this weekend, you might have noticed that Matt Fitzpatrick is chipping cack-handed. Why does he do that? Because it takes all wrist hinge out of his chipping stroke. Okay, so all we're trying to do is take as much wrist action out of the chipping action as possible. And if you can do that by having no breakdown in your wrist and altogether, but even though a little bit of wrist hinge still works fine. Right, so what is firstly the bounce on your wedges? Bounce is your leading edge here, okay? And why is it called the bounce? Well, that's quite simple. It is called the bounce because it is designed to just bounce off the turf, okay? So when you're doing that nice, easy chipping action, we just graze the turf. Your club just bounces off it. So the club strikes the ground, slides along the ground, just grazing the top, and that is why it is called the bounce. And if you can learn how to use that bounce correctly in your chipping action, we can make chipping a lot easier and take a lot of the fear out of those chip shots that sometimes we don't look forward to. Okay, so by having that nice simple action and just bouncing your wedge off the ground, what this allows us to do is it actually gives us a huge margin of error for striking our chip shots. And once you realise this, it starts to take a lot of the fear out of chipping. So if we actually just come down and look close up now, I'll show you exactly what I mean by this. Okay, so by using the bounce correctly, by just keeping that motion nice and simple as we said before, and just grazing the top of the turf, allowing the bounce to just hit the ground and then just slide along, what it means is that actually you don't have to strike every single chip shot perfect every time, because actually if you've got that action correct and use the bounce, you can strike it an inch behind the ball and still get a good result with your chip shot. And the reason for that is, to show you kind of what happens, is the club comes in, hits the ground there, slides along, gathers the ball, and then hits the shot. So actually, all of a sudden, you have that sort of realization that actually, I don't need to clip these perfect every time. So if I address one normally, and then just strike it normally, just hit a lovely little chip shot. But if I get this one, put it in exactly the same place, address it an inch behind the ball, and strike it an inch behind the ball, you still gather the ball lovely, get the ball in the air, and hit still a really nice chip shot onto the green. Okay, so now we've demonstrated the huge margin of error you've got on your chip shots. You can start to feel a little bit more easy about when you're playing these shots. So if we play to this near pin here, this one I'm going to address the ball as normal, right behind, and try and just play a nice little chip shot. But on this one here, I'm going to put it in exactly the same place. Now I'm going to actually address this an inch behind the ball, and I'm going to strike the ground an inch behind the ball. And it hasn't been clipped as nicely as the first one, which means it hasn't had quite the control, but the ball has still popped up in the air, lovely, and gone onto the green. And I'm on a reasonably tight lie here. So once again, an inch behind the ball, strike the ground an inch behind the ball. Look at that. So we can actually, by realising that if we use the bounce on our wedges in the correct way, by just practicing a simple action that just grazes the ground, it just bounces off the ground, that actually you've got a huge margin of error on your chip shots, and you don't have to strike them absolutely perfectly every time to still get pretty good, very good in some instances, chipping results out on the golf course.